This is being recorded. As it says, it's being recorded. So just for the candidates know this, but just for people who are joining us, just let me go through how this works. So we'll start off with each candidate will be able to speak for up to 2 minutes. If they're still going at 2 minutes, Pam will just mute them. I'll give them a 10-second warning. If they're still going at 2 minutes, they'll be muted and we'll move on. They'll speak in alphabetical order, and Pete Spears is unable to be here tonight, so Mal Rogers is going to read Pete's speech. But that's all Mal can do. He can't answer questions on behalf of Pete, and he can't make a summing up statement. All he can do is read Pete's opening address. So Mal will do that on Pete's behalf. And then when we've had the opening statements, we'll move to questions from the floor. I'm going to ask people to limit themselves to one question each, that the questions are questions, they're not speeches. And the questions will be put to all the candidates. So unless there's a very particular question of clarification about something somebody said, questions will go to all candidates and they will all have a chance to respond. If you want to ask a question, could you please raise a virtual hand? The way that you raise a virtual hand is if you go down to the bar at the bottom, it's got a list of things. You've got reactions, which is the second one from the right. If you click on reactions, it says raise your hand. If you can do it that way, that'll be really helpful, please. We have disabled the chat because we want people to stay focused on the conversation rather than start side conversations. That can be unfair and disruptive to people who are speaking. So we've disabled the chat. And when you ask a question, could you give your name and deanery, please? We are recording this and not everything might be captured. And I think I've said this to the candidates, and I say this for reasons just for clarity. We are going to put this online, so we're going to record it and we'll put it on the diocesan website. So in that sense, it will become public what is said. And so just be aware that what is said can become public and can be passed on. I don't make any comment beyond that. And this election is about God's kingdom and God's church. And so I said to all candidates, I'm saying to everybody, expect it to be conducted with kingdom values of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There'll be no personalised attacks, either from candidates or from the floor. And if I think there are, I will intervene. We'll finish by 9, and before 9 o'clock, each candidate is allowed up to 1 minute to make a concluding statement. They don't have to, but they'll have the facility for 1 minute. But I'm intending not to have a break because I'd like to have the flow of the conversation. There are, I noticed a couple of lay people here who technically can't vote in this. You're very welcome, but I'm going to give priority to questions from clergy because they are the electorate, if that's okay. Is everybody happy with all of that? Is there anything that anyone wants to go over in terms of clarification? Is that okay? Okay, so we'll start off with the speeches, please. We're doing it in a very imaginative alphabetical order. So, and that's alphabetical order of surname. So we start off with David Brooke, please. So David, when you're ready, please.
I don't need to reiterate anything I wrote in my address. I just want to do a little bit of a whistle-top personal tour to make myself a little bit more three-dimensional for those of you who don't know me. I was born and raised in the northeast to Yorkshire stock. Let's get that out of the way. I'm a physics graduate. That's my academic training. I taught for a few years, then went into the IT industry in marketing and technical roles with Dell and Epson, and ended up running Dell's international websites while doing my ordination training, which was a little bit interesting. For those 3 years, I was ordained in St Albans in 1999. So what astonishes me is I've been doing this for longer than I did the rest of it all put together. I'm closer to retirement than I am to the beginning of my career, so I'm sensitized to some of the issues that come along with that. Also highly sensitized to some of the issues around clergy couples, which don't often get mentioned, and we are a blessing to the church, I would assert. We've also been through the business of very public grief as a clergy couple, losing our son to a shock illness. So been through some of the stuff that impacts on well-being and have a real interest in that. In terms of my faith influences, I was brought up Methodist. I encountered the choral tradition at university. I worshipped in open evangelical churches when we were first married, in a tiny Lutheran church in Japan, in Episcopal Church of the USA churches when I was working for Dell. And I claim a breadth, an honest breadth. I'm probably the only evangelical area dean who's held a deanery synod framed by benediction. And I would say that now I'm equally comfortable in both the New Wine and the Green Belt traditions. So that's me.
Thanks, David. Next one, Daniel, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. So I've outlined in my election address my positions on key items for the next synod, but I want to explain tonight why I think you should vote for me. Firstly, I'm absolutely passionately committed to this diocese, having been nurtured by its ministry from birth, and I have no desire to serve anywhere else, and will push very strongly for a fairer distribution of resources where there seems at present to be such a great national imbalance. Secondly, my recent experience. In my previous post, I held a deanery-wide role focusing on discipleship, and this will no doubt be at the core of the next synod, putting flesh on the bones of the missionary disciples theme. And I feel that I can contribute to that process by being aware of some of the key elements needed, firmly believing that if we do this correctly, we will, in the words of the French theologian Yves Congar, experience a springtime as that we cannot yet imagine. Thirdly, charity. I always try to act charitably with colleagues, particularly those with whom I disagree. And as a traditional Catholic, and therefore a very obvious minority within our church, I understand the need to go the extra mile in collaboration and in my dealings with people. And I feel that acting charitably is going to be an essential quality that's needed for the next General Synod. 3 reasons: passion for the diocese, my experience in key policy areas, and a strong commitment to charity and charitable behaviour. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Dan, please.
Hi, I'm Dan, Vicar of St Mark's, Haydock, and it's my privilege to offer myself for General Synod this year. I'm married to Claire, and we have 2 young lads, and my passions are to see those who don't know Jesus come to know him, to enter into the relationship, that freeing relationship where we truly are known and loved by the God who we all serve. My top passions at the moment, particularly with General Synod in sight, are for the environment, safeguarding God's amazing world. And when I was a youth rep in 2008 on the General Synod, that was one of that was the thing I actually spoke to Synod about, was my concern for the environment and representing all the young people on the Church of England Youth Council. Church unity is just out of my heart, my core. I truly believe Jesus wants us to go forward together, to be one as he is one with our Father. I feel we focus far too much on our divisions in the church and not enough on what unites us, namely Jesus Christ, the God who loves us and calls for us to follow him. And in 2008, I was shocked and appalled at the way that brothers and sisters in Christ, particularly clergy, spoke to each other in the debates that year. I seek to be a gentle, loving voice, following Jesus as faithfully as I possibly can. Living in love and faith has been something it's been a real privilege and a joy to be a part of the rollout group for Liverpool Diocese. I've run 2 courses with over 30 people. We did the last one in 2 groups. It's been it's been an amazing opportunity and journey with members of our own congregation who disagree, but finding that way of love. I truly believe this is one of the big things we can offer our world at the moment, is where we disagree with others, we can learn to go forward together and commit to each other in love and in
seconds.
And food and finance is also a really big thing, and I'd be excited to have the opportunity to be part of those bigger discussions nationally.
Thanks, Dan. Jack, next, please.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight. I'd really appreciate your vote. I'm Jack Shepherd, and I'm currently working as missional priest in the parish of Upholland and Dalton, which would be recognised as a liberal Anglo-Catholic parish. Before that, I was working as curate at St Paul's in Skelmersdale, which would be recognised as a charismatic evangelical parish. And I'm really excited about working across traditions and making sure that different voices can be heard at General Synod. Being part of the church, I thought that I would base my address on 3 points, all beginning with a P. So I am passionate about the Diocese of Liverpool. It was amazing, David Shepherd, talking about God's divine bias towards the poor. Clifford Martin was part of my extended family, and my mum remembers a story of when Bishop Martin picked her up as a child wearing his long purple robe. He said, she said to him that when she was older, she'd like to wear a purple robe like that. And he said that that wouldn't be possible because there wasn't such a thing as a lady bishop. And my mum said that she wanted to be the first lady bishop. I'm afraid Libby Lane beat her to it. But I think that for me represents something of my commitment to the diocese, something that we've seen throughout the years, the history of care for the poor, but also diversity represented in our diocese, really passionate about women in ministry. The other points that I've raised are that I'm passionate about church growth. I want to see the parish saved, but I also want to see the parish reached. And thirdly,
10 seconds.
About working together. And I think that's been seen through my involvement in Bishops' Council, Deanery Synod and Diocesan Synod. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. So next, Mal, on behalf of Pete Spears, please.
Thanks, Mike. So from Pete, I would like to apologise both to my fellow candidates and to the clergy of the diocese for not being able to attend this evening. I'm on a silent retreat all this week, rearranged from 2020 because of the pandemic and before I knew the date of these hustings. If you have anything you would like to ask me about my views and my election address, then please don't hesitate to be in touch. It has been a great privilege to have represented the clergy of this diocese since 2000. The Church of England continues to face great challenges, and I am offering my significant experience of General Synod processes, as well as a proven track record of participation in debates and the work that flows from being a member of Synod. We need those elected to speak up for the interests of our diocese and the Northern Province as a whole. There is much we can learn from other dioceses, and there is much we can share with other dioceses so that our common life is enriched. The pandemic has impacted on the finances of individuals, communities, and the church throughout the world, with the poorest being hardest hit. The church must continue to address injustice in the world as a whole, but also within her own life, so that we can speak with authenticity. At the same time, we need to become a church that equips the whole people of God to be disciples, that accepts and values all our traditions, and one that better reflects the age and diversity of our country. If elected, I will continue to be someone who honours the spectrum of views held on a variety of issues and listen carefully to others.
Thanks, Mal. Next is Martin, please.
Thanks, Mike. So I've lived in Liverpool Diocese for over 50 years and been ordained here for nearly 30. I'm standing on an unashamedly inclusive platform. I am an equalities rep within the Faith Workers branch of Unite the Union, and I believe that we need a strong House of Clergy, especially at the moment. It feels like since the introduction of common tenure just over 10 years ago, it feels like there's been a growing imbalance between the rights and responsibilities of individual clergy and the power of the Church of England institution. And over that time, we've seen a rise in clergy stress and clergy being treated unfairly across the Church of England. I'm on the National Executive of the Church of England Clergy Advocates, and as a body, which is probably the closest thing to a professional body that the Church of England clergy have, we've got over 1,000 members, so about 30 or 40 in each diocese. And so we have a national idea of the things that are really troubling clergy, and we have the opportunity to raise those with National Church of England officers. Just last week, I was talking to national officers about issues with curates not being able to get first posts because of the lack of posts across the Church of England, partly because of finances. Issues to do with dispossessions, effectively clergy being sacked, being on the rise. And I think it's really important that we can have a strong House of Clergy so that we can address these issues, and not least in the reform of the mission and pastoral measure and the clergy discipline measure.
Thank you. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you.
Next, Miranda, please.
Hello everyone, I'm Miranda Threlfall-Holmes. I'm a team rector in Liverpool City Centre. I've been ordained for about 18 years now. I've served in a whole variety of different parish contexts across the north of England, and as a university chaplain, and I echo what other people have already said about working for fairer distribution of resources. I'm very grateful to Bob Lewis and Sonia Dora for their nomination. I'm standing as an inclusive church candidate. I'm committed to full equality and inclusion for everyone in the church. I've already been emailed to be asked if that means I support same-sex marriage. Yes, I do, and conscience clauses and so on. I'd really hope to see the recommendations of that recent report on racial justice being implemented in the next synod. I currently serve in 3 churches that span the evangelical, Catholic and liberal wings of the church, and that, as others have said, that countering that tendency to tribalism and polarisation that we've been seeing in the church as well as in wider society is important to me. I've been on synod before for a few years, so I know what's involved. And one of the things I want to promise you is that I will read the paperwork. You know, there can be a tendency to think that we'll only show up for the issues that we say we think are important, but I know just how important the unglamorous routine work is that needs doing, even if it's not the stuff that grabs the headlines. There's going to be really important debates coming up about things like clergy wellbeing, about safeguarding. They're going to continue to be important. Our progress to be a carbon neutral church, hugely important. And that difficult question of how we do achieve financial stability, sustainability without letting worries about finances distract us from Jesus as our primary focus. So if you'd like me to represent you on these and all the other issues that will come up, I'd be very grateful for your vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Miranda. And then Kate, please.
Thanks, Mike. Hi everyone, I'm Kate Wharton, Vicar of St Bart's, Roby. If you can hear a weird noise, my printer has just started doing a weird maintenance thing, sorry. This is a strange hustings in a strange General Synod election season in a strange year. And I'm also aware that I'm the 8th person in a row that you have listened to before you can do the bit that you probably came for, which is to ask us questions. You've seen my election address, so I won't repeat what's written there. I guess there are a few main reasons why you might want to vote for me ahead of any of these other lovely people, all of whom would do an excellent job. You might want to vote for me because I've already done the last 6 years on General Synod and I found that I could do it. I enjoyed it mostly. I turned up, I read the papers, I contributed to the debates, I voted, I got involved. That means I'd be starting from a good foundation of understanding what's what. You might want to vote for me because some of the things I'm especially interested in are things that you're also especially interested in, as I listed on my election address: mission and evangelism, urban ministry, working with and among disabled and deaf people, environmental issues, singleness, relationships and sexuality, and children and young people. Those aren't the only things Synod will cover in the next quinquennium, and they aren't the only things that matter in today's church, but they're things I'm especially keen to have a voice into. You might want to vote for me because you want to see someone like me representing you at General Synod, a woman, an evangelical, a single person, someone with a lot of inner city parish experience. If those things or other things that I've written or said make sense to you, then I'd be delighted to have your vote. Thanks.
Thanks, Kate. So that's all the opening speeches. Thanks to everybody for those. So it's open for questions from the floor. As I say, if you could raise a virtual hand. We are on 2 screens, so I'll need to flick between, so be patient with me. Ask your question and each of the candidates will respond, please. So if you weren't here earlier to raise a virtual hand, go down to reactions at the bottom and there should be a facility that says raise your hand. Who would like to start, please?
Bob Lewis has.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Bob, please.
Thank you. Bob Lewis, Topsworth and Wavertree, and presently chair of the House of Clergy. Same-sex couples will be able to have their civil partnerships or marriages blessed in churches in Wales if similar legislation comes before our General Synod. I'd just be interested to know which way candidates would vote and why.
Thank you. So it's going to be 1 minute answer per candidate. I'm going to start with Daniel, please.
Thanks, Bob. A very tricky issue. I'm not going to beat out the bush. I mean, I've maintained in my election address that I personally do not feel comfortable with a change in the canons in this respect. But what I do want to do is to have the ongoing conversations that Living in Love and Faith have started to produce within the church, and to have good disagreement based on strong principles of respect, mutual love, and understanding. But I don't think, and I'm going to be honest, I don't think that's something that I would be able to vote in conscience for, due to the positions I've laid out within the election address, that I try to represent the wider Catholic opinion of the church.
Thank you. Dan, please.
Thank you. Brilliant question. First and foremost, we're about loving people and coming alongside them in their lives, welcoming radically as Jesus does. As I read the teaching of Jesus and the Bible as a whole, I do hold with the current Anglican position, so I couldn't in all conscience vote for a change in that. But it is good disagreement. It's walking alongside each other and committing to each other where we disagree that I believe we can really see a radical change in our world, seeing the end of ghettos and radicalisation in the far corners, actually bringing the conversation together and walking genuinely with people in love. So that's yeah, where I'm at.
Thanks, Dan. Jack, please.
Yeah, the Liberal Anglo-Catholic parish in which I am a missional priest is firmly committed to an inclusive and diverse policy when it comes to church. So if it was voted through, we would be having blessings for people in same-sex relationships. We would be doing marriages for people in same-sex relationships if it came to that point. And we've had really good discussions in the parish about these issues, recognising that a range of traditions, a range of perspectives are represented there. As someone who represents the charismatic evangelical tradition in the parish, I would not be able to vote for that in all conscience. But I believe passionately in working towards a diverse and inclusive church and listening to and representing the voices of people who do.
Thank you. Martin, please. Martin, you're on mute if you're talking.
Sorry, I think it unmuted and muted again. So yes, I said I stood unashamedly on an inclusive platform. So yes, I would vote for that change. I think we've seen a shift in General Synod. One of the more recent motions on issues to do with human sexuality, a take note motion, was rejected, I think because lots of people felt it didn't go far enough. And I think the Living in Love and Faith conversations that we're having are really great. And I know people are enjoying having them, people are enjoying listening to each other in the team ministry that I serve. Certainly seeing the videos on that, when you see the human story, you see how actually complex it is.
10 seconds.
And I believe God blesses love and faithfulness and would do so in that context.
Thank you. Miranda, please.
Hi, Bob. Yeah, absolutely. I'd vote for that. I'd hope we could go a bit further. I mean, I think it would be better for us to actually be celebrating marriages in church rather than simply blessing civil marriages like Wales have done. So hopefully we could go on better than Wales. Why do I say that? I was on General Synod for quite a few years when the processes and debates that ended up leading to living in love and faith happened. So I've been involved in these conversations for quite a long time and heard a lot of the different voices. And having been a woman priest involved in a lot of the debates around women's ordination and around opening the episcopate to women, I know something of what it feels like to have your identity up for grabs and being debated as an issue. And I really want us to stop doing that to other people as soon as we can.
Thank you. Kate, please.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks everyone else. How good to hear everyone else's answers and see where people's thinking is at. I wouldn't be able to vote for that in where my thinking currently is. That wouldn't be something I could do. One of the reasons I felt very strongly called to stand for Synod 6 years ago and feel that I want to stand again is because I'm so keen that we have these kind of conversations, which Living in Love and Faith enabled us to do, where people of all kinds of different views can genuinely debate what they actually think, rather than the caricature of what we think each other think. And I'm in a relatively unusual position as being a woman, an ordained woman who has a whatever you want to call it, conservative, orthodox, traditional, whatever view on matters of sexuality, which I think gives me a kind of an interesting angle on it. At the end of the day, my view is still my view, but it's an interesting place to be as a woman with that view. And I think
10 seconds.
I've valued the last 6 years having these kind of ongoing conversations and would value continuing to have them.
Thank you. And David, please.
Always difficult going last on these things. One of the joys of my ministry here in Wigan is that we host in my bit of Wigan an open table congregation, which I'm fully part of and enthusiastically part of. Some years ago, I found myself in a situation where I was on the road towards marrying a couple, one of whom was going through the whole process of transition, which is much more complex issue even than the question than the one as to whether I would marry a gay or lesbian couple. So I've been engaged in this personally and positively. However, I can't tell you how I would vote, Bob, because I think there are a whole set of complicated issues which might try to be, people might try to railroad these all through together. So the questions we're dealing with are complex. And the whole question of what is brought forwards is complicated. I can't know how I'll vote till I see the legislation.
Thank you. Another question, please? And if you could raise your virtual hand. Tabitha, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Reverend Tabitha, and I'm the Associate Priest at Liverpool Parish Church. So here's a question. I hope you have read the anti-racism report submitted by Archbishop's Anti-Racism Task Force. So my question is, what is your understanding how well-being varies among clergy of UKME groups, that UK minority ethnic groups? That's the question again. What is your understanding how well-being varies among clergy of UKME groups?
Thanks, Tabitha. So Dan, can we start with you, please?
This is something I want to learn more about, and reading the report is something that I haven't yet done. I'll hold my hand up and say I'm not there yet. Give me a bit of time, and that's just what I'd like to be doing. Yeah, that's just an honest answer at this moment. Just passionate about. We all need to be equally treated, and well-being needs to be high on the agenda, as it is in our current church in St Mark's. But the more I can learn about these things, that the more we can all, the more we all can learn, the more we can contribute. So thank you.
Thank you. Jack, please.
Yeah, this is absolutely at the heart of what I'm standing for. Everything that was heard last year with campaigning around racism is stuff that I hold really dear to my heart. It was a privilege to study with Tabitha at Cranmer Hall, and it was with horror that I watched a programme a couple of years ago, last year, about the experience of people from other races, ethnic minority backgrounds who had faced problems with their well-being at Cranmer and other theological institutions as a result of racism in the Church of England. And so I passionately believe that this needs to change. My girlfriend co-founded a charity that works around the country with refugees and asylum seekers. I recognise that's only a small part of the problem.
10 seconds.
And that's really important to me as well. It can't just be about policy, it has to be about relationship, trust, and knowing people.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to cut you off. Martin, please.
Thank you. Well, as standing on an inclusive platform and an equalities rep for Unite the Union, you'd expect me to say that this is a really serious issue that the Church needs to tackle. Through Church of England Clergy Advocates, we've represented many members who've suffered from racism directly and indirectly. And it's an issue that the Church has grappled with, and some good work has been done, but there is still much more to do. So I think the report is very timely, and it's very important that General Synod takes real action on this, and not least through the House of Clergy.
Thank you. Miranda, please.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I was absolutely horrified that, when you look at that report and it just catalogues all the recommendations that have been made over the years, hardly any of which have been implemented. And when that was first reported, you think, oh, well, great, we'll do all that. And then they all seem to get kicked into the long grass again. I mean, it just seems absolutely horrifying. And I think that really answers your question, that it seems to me, and from speaking to people like Augustine and Gerald and so on, and reading their books, that obviously there are issues of overt racism and all the microaggressions and so on that people face. But that speaks to there being a much more fundamental issue of what I'm learning to call structural whiteness that we need to somehow address, which is obviously having a really profound impact on people's well-being.
Thank you. Kate, please.
Thanks, Tabitha, for that question. Yes, I have read the report and like others, found it deeply shocking. Also recently read Ghost Ship by Azariah Frantz Williams, which is just incredibly challenging and shocking and really recommended reading. In fact, I've tried recently to read quite widely around this whole area because I'm aware that I need to understand more as much as I'm able to do in my position. I think Miranda's absolutely right. We've got to be starting to hold to account. It's simply not acceptable that these recommendations have been made and not followed through. I was really moved at a recent synod to hear Andrew Morton-Mumby talking about some of his experience and some of the people that he's been in contact with, and I think there's huge well-being issues here, and it would be great to see much greater diversity in the different houses in synod, but whoever is there and whoever is elected, we need to be making this a priority. Yeah.
Thank you. David, please.
Well, even with the report at hand, I mean, I still feel as though I'm shamingly and woefully underinformed, partly because I feel like I need to hear more stories through one-to-one dialogue. In the last two sessions of Synod or Quinconia, we've focused on dialogue over the issue of women's ministry, and I engaged with the traditional points of view there. Now we've been going through the LLF process, and there's been another kind of engagement. I feel like this is one that I can't duck now. I need those one-to-one personal engagements, which I've never had, and I'm shamed by that. My own personal danger here is that I've been on the receiving end of racism while living in Japan. I've been part of those who are pointed at and called for all sorts of nasty names. And my danger is I could project how that affected me and my family and their welfare onto others, and I need to hear their stories, not project mine.
Thank you. And Daniel, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I've got to be honest as well, like Dan, I've not yet read the report in any great detail, so I'm not going to try and fudge an answer, although what I will say is I'm absolutely committed to the equal treatment of all people, and there is absolutely no place at all for any form of racism within the life of the church. That's something I'm passionate about. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please. Okay, if you raise your virtual hand, I just need to scroll between screens.
Simon Moore.
Okay, thank you. Simon, is that either Simon or Louise, whichever. Thank you.
Evening, everyone. It's fairly clear that the Church
Sorry,
of
Simon,
England...
can you just give your name and deanery, please? Sorry.
Yes, sorry. Simon Moore. We're in St Helens. It's fairly clear to see that resources in the Church of England are unequally distributed, and I wondered what your response might be to that at Synod.
Thank you. So we're starting with Jack, please.
Yeah, I think this comes right to the heart of all the issues around saving our parishes, as well as issues that affect the diocese and issues of justice that we've just been looking at, including the problems that I frequently hear of lots of resources being pulled towards the south rather than the north of our country, and I'm sure issues within our own diocese of where those resources are going. And I think the only way that can be tackled and challenged is by listening to the needs of local areas, and by making sure that those voices and those perspectives are heard clearly and well articulated at General Synod, as well as other levels of accountability in the Church of England. And that's why I want to be available, not just to share what I think, but to be here to listen to others. I want to be someone who that your thoughts and your parish can be heard at General Synod.
Thank you. Martin, please.
Thank you. Yes. I mean, I served for 10 years on various boards and committees in the National Church of England. And it became very apparent to me over that time how kind of South-centric the Church of England is in its views and its outlook. And I think there's real need for the Convocation of York, for the Northern Diocese, the Northern Reps, to make sure that there is a fair distribution of resources. I went to Greenbelt recently, well, Greenbelt Light as it was, and listened to a talk about somebody who'd done a lot of research into Northern Church. And there's lots of signs of hope in the North. We have something distinctive to give, but we're also probably about 15 years ahead of church decline in the South. And so it's really important, I think, that more resources come up north.
Thank you. Miranda, please.
Yeah, I've been trying to think how we fix this. I mean, it's tricky with charity law, with each individual parish being its own charity and so on. So it's not there's not a straightforward solution. But I mean, I've looked at accounts. I've been on Dawson and Deanery Synods in Newcastle and Durham, as well as Liverpool. And this is it's a really broad issue. I'm increasingly thinking that what we need to do is make sure that parish share, or deanery share, if we want to call it that, is distributed across the whole country, not by diocese. I'm beginning to think that actually the diocesan boundaries, where we have, dioceses in the south that have got, 20 million quid stuck in the bank and are living off the proceeds, it's just ridiculously unfair. And actually, so you've got parishes, incredibly wealthy parishes in Oxford, paying the same parish share as my tiny little church in Durham or Liverpool. So I think just sharing that across the board, across diocesan boundaries, might be the solution.
Thank you. Kate, please.
Thanks, Simon. Brilliant question. I'm hugely passionate about this. It's something that I think is really important. It's something that I think people like Philip North and Pete Wilcox are saying really important things about. I was really disappointed at the last synod that that Pete's motion to discuss this got bumped when the agenda got changed and we weren't able to discuss it. I've actually still got on my phone, I know you can't see it there, saved a screenshot that I took from synod a couple of years ago because I was so horrified by it, which shows the endowment assets by diocese. Oxford at the top with 154 million, Liverpool at the bottom with just over 1 million. I don't know how we fix this. Miranda's suggestions are really interesting, but I think it's massively important. It's a conversation that's got to be had. You know, Oxford might not want to have it. I don't know. I'm not picking on them particularly, but I think it's important that this conversation is kept centrally.
Thank you. David, please.
Of course, this is really difficult because as each person speaks, you think of more and more things. And I think what I want to say is that Miranda stole my thunder by talking about parish share. This is about as easy to solve as the parish share conundrum. And, you know, 40 however many dioceses have been struggling to do that for years and nobody's cracked it. But I think that the point is it's not a mathematical problem. It's a theological problem and it's an ecclesiological problem. And, you know, if we turn to Catholic social teaching on subsidiarity and solidarity, that's more of a help to us. If we could actually get our hands and our minds around that, it would help. So it's a really tough one. And of course, there is also the fact that it's the more obvious resources that are inequitably distributed. We all have the same number of people.
10 seconds.
If we believe in our people, then they're all equally gifted. So in that sense, we have a totally equal distribution of resources.
Thank you. Daniel, please.
Thank you, Mike. I think we need to go back to the scriptures, fundamentally. The Acts of the Apostles tell us that they held everything in common, the earliest Christians. And I think that has to inform our conversation moving forward. I agree with what David's just said. I think it is a theological issue and greater distribution, fairer distribution. And like what some of the other candidates have said about the historic assets, I just find it well, I can't get my head around it. Why should this diocese be at the bottom of the pile? There needs to be a far, far more evenly distributed system. I don't know quite how that happens other than people continually advocating the need for it to happen. And then we work out the details. Thanks.
Thank you. And finally on this one, Dan, please.
Thank you. I can remember being an ordinand in Ridley and hearing I think one of our principal just saying, do you know, the Lord isn't calling all of you to the south. And I was from Derby Diocese at the time. I was convinced I was going back there and I did. And while I was in Derby, just got a real love. I was actually in Glossop, real love for the north, which is irrational, really. I haven't really spent much time in the north until now, but just this real cool. Simon, we're in the deanery chapter together, and I think it's your passion that has started to rub off on me. I mean, I can say when I arrived in the diocese, I was unaware actually of just where we were compared to the rest of the country in distribution of wealth across the Church of England. So it's a newer thing for me, and I'd love to have a chat with you, Simon, and Louise about that. But would love, you know, we'll be advocating for that if I were voted on to synod.
Thank you. Next question, please. It's one of the joys of being colourblind and having hands going up against background. So if I don't.
I can't see any other hands.
I can't see any other hands. Anybody else? Sorry, thank you. Elaine, please. Elaine, you're on mute. Sorry.
The clergy discipline measures have been in conversation a lot lately, and the Sheldon Hub produced a report on it. I'd like to know how much of a priority this is for you in the list of things that you hope to address as a member of Synod.
Thank you. We're starting with Martin, please.
Thanks, Elaine. Great question. And yeah, reading those reports, there's some real horror stories, and unfortunately lots of horror stories there about how clergy have been treated and mistreated, either by the use of the clergy discipline measure against them. Many might say the abuse of the clergy discipline measure against them. And also the threat of having the clergy discipline measure used against them. One of the things that we were talking about with national officers last week was how many of the dispossession cases, which are perhaps provoked through finance or through an idea of pastoral reorganisation, the cleric is actually threatened with dispossession and threatened with the clergy discipline measure to get them to move on. So this is really top priority for me on Synod.
Thank you. Miranda, please.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, this is on my list of kind of 5 or 6 top priorities on my election address. I wouldn't say it was my top priority because I'm a little bit wary of kind of putting our own well-being top of my list of priorities. But absolutely, it's one of the huge things we've got to address. I think the Sheldon recommendations have got to be taken seriously. And I would certainly support measures that go down that 2-track approach where, you know, there's one track for relatively minor things that aren't going to lead to loss of home and livelihood, and another track for things that could be a thing. One of the really strange things is that all this, all these awful stories that Sheldon have gathered are being held on the one hand, and on the other we've got all the really serious safeguarding lapses where nothing's been done. And I just can't quite put those together. It just seems absolutely bonkers. It seems to be used more for kind of bullying of clergy than to actually deal with serious abuses. So it definitely needs sorting out.
Thank you. Kate, please.
Thanks, Elaine. Fantastic question. It's hugely important. Until fairly recently, I only was aware of kind of anecdotal stories around this, friends that happened to have gone through this, which was bad enough. But then through Sheldon, actually, I became involved in learning more about it. I joined the group on Sheldon that's looking into this because of my role on Synod, and I wanted to get better informed. And it's horrifying to see those stories. And I think it comes back a little bit to sort of what we were talking about with Tabitha's question, which is we can't allow this to be something sort of suggested in reports but never followed through, never done. We've got to move on this. I think there's some really obvious structural issues with this. You know, the bishop being the primary person whose judgment is on it rather than the pastoral care person, that needs to change. The fact that we've only really got one mode of sort of discipline for anything, as Miranda says, I think there's huge issues with it, and it's got to change.
Thank you. David, please.
Okay, well, first off to say, I mean, I think one of the problems here is that we just haven't cracked the issue of what accountability looks like. And I do believe in accountability. I expect to be accountable as a clergy person in the Church of England, as I was when I was working in a commercial environment, and that could sometimes be a little bit brutal too. But brutal is just not the right way to go about this, and it is brutal for those who experience it. And of course, most of our bishops have experienced this themselves. They've been on the wrong end of CDM procedures. So I'm not sufficiently urgent about it to want to go on the business committee of the General Synod to push it up the agenda. That would be hell for me. But I think it's going to find its way up there anyway. And I think I will be giving it huge priority in terms of scrutinising the details. This is one where the devil is in the detail. We can't get it wrong twice.
Thank you. Daniel, please.
Thank you. I think it's a very important question that needs urgent resolution, because I know of friends who have not necessarily been on the receiving end of it, but who are very scared about the prospect of ever being on the receiving end of it. And I include myself in that. I think every priest has probably considered that outcome at some point. It's not one of my main priorities, I'll be honest, because I've not really mentioned it a great deal, if anything, on my election address. But it's clear that some real work does need to be done. And I think a balance needs to be found between accountability, power, and pastoral care, and how we hold those things together. And that is going to be a tricky thing to find a balance to, but I think it is achievable.
Thank you. Dan, please.
As a clergyman I was a curate for 3 years, and I've been in post here 3 years. So CDM is something I've heard about. I've heard others have gone through it who haven't had brilliant experiences. I do believe in accountability, but it doesn't sound like the system we have is right, and we need to find that correct system. For me, being on General Synod will give me an opportunity to learn more and actually prioritise learning more about how our church is structured, past what I need to know as a parish priest. So that's one of the things I would look to be hearing about and learning more about. But CDM definitely needs to change from what it is, from the little I've read and heard anecdotally from friends.
Thank you. Jack, please.
Yeah, I believe passionately in that phrase in the scriptures that talks about perfect love casts out fear. And there are far too many people hiding in fear because of abuse of CDM measures, but also hiding in fear because of safeguarding abuses. And I believe that we need suitable accountability structures in place that do not allow safeguarding abuses to go unnoticed and unraised. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jack. Okay, next question, please. Emma, please.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, Emma Williams, West Derby Deanery. I've heard a couple of you mention about parish structure and perhaps saving parish structures, I think in a couple of the addresses as well. Just wondered what your thoughts are on the parish system that we currently have. Thank you.
Thank you. Miranda, start with you, please.
Thanks, Emma. Save the parish is the big rallying cry at the moment, isn't it? I mean, I'm a historian. I was a historian before I was ordained, so I think of the parish system as hugely important as the sort of current 1,000-year experiment that the Church of England is running. So I think what's incredibly important about it is that commitment to being there for every single person, not just to churchgoers, not just to the baptised, not just to people who are signed up on the dotted line with parish chair or whatever. And that, I think, is the essence of parish that we've got to keep, and the importance of place. And of being not kind of the random Church of England in the ether somewhere, but being committed to this soil and this land and this shopping centre and, you know, this dingy row of houses, you know, this place, incarnational ministry really, that's incarnating the message of Jesus to this people in this place. There's going to be structural change, there's bound to be, but there always has been. But those principles need to stay.
Thank you. Kate, please.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, what a question. Gosh, I can't possibly answer it in a minute. I'd struggle to answer it in an hour. But I think the parish system is one of the fabulous things about the Church of England. I've got a friend who leads a very large free evangelical church. He said if he was starting his ministry again, he'd be an Anglican because of the opportunities afforded us in one sense by that, occasional offices, all of those wonderful ways in that we get because of our parish system. So it's wonderful. And if we were starting now, we'd never start from where we are, you know, so it is what it is. We've got what we've got. And I think it's really important that we make the most of that and use all its incredible missional benefits. But there probably are also things that need to be tweaked and changed. And I think we need to hold on to the good, maybe change the things that need to be changed, not be kind of precious about it, but also not just change for the sake of change. So I think there's a sense of needing to be adaptable, but also saying what an incredible resource and opportunity it is as well.
Thank you. David, please.
Well, I speak as, you know, part of one of the largest benefits groups in the country, in Wigan, and, you know, would that we were a single parish, because I think we would be living out, when we get to that stage, we'll be living out the ideals of the parish system more than we were before the 1st of January 2020, when we were 29 parishes. I just want to say ditto to a lot of what Miranda said. And the fragmented parishes we have today are not the ones that were birthed at the beginning of that 1,000-year experiment. And it's how we live into whatever structures we have that make or break the parish system, not the structures themselves.
Thank you. Daniel, please.
Thank you. I've put in my election address that the parish system is very, very close to my heart. It's about what I'm standing for, really. I think the key issue is the connection between the parish system and a previous question that was asked about resourcing. If we don't want our parishes to collapse, and if we don't want them to fold in any particular way, then we've got to get the funding right so that the poorest parish in the country has the same sort of opportunities as the most wealthy parish in the country. And like many of the people on screen tonight, my parish is in the top 150 most deprived parishes in the country. But I can't run my parish in the same way that
10 seconds.
A large parish church operates, because I don't have the resourcing. So I think it's matching those two up, and that will save the parish.
Thank you. Dan, please.
Thank you. Great question. I love the ideals of having a Christian presence in every community. It's one of those amazing things of the Church of England. The parish structure has offered that for centuries. I believe the church has big questions around the viability of keeping all of its historic worship bases running, and exploring new forms of ministry, I think, will be important in our future. I do believe that we need a more streamlined approach to doing church in the 21st century, releasing new ministers. I do believe in equipping the laity further, then that will be an essential part of the parish system in the future. The important thing for me about church is about gathering to worship God and making disciples who make disciples, and having that culture in every church. And I would humbly suggest in places, if that wasn't the case, that actually releasing us into that space, maybe losing some of the weight of the historic buildings, but releasing new discipling communities in the parish system.
Thank you. Jack, please.
I believe passionately in saving the parish, including allocation of funds, clergy, stipendiary, and proper training of clergy, including residential training, and recognising and overcoming the disparity between parishes. But I also believe in reaching the parish. I'm really excited about the messy church that you've been running at St Anne's half-termly on a Saturday afternoon. And I don't think that kind of thing is antithetical to the work of the parish. I've been working on the core team for the Joshua Centre over the past couple of years, and it's been with real excitement to see parishes renewed and revitalised and encouraged through that fantastic work.
Thank you. Martin, please.
Thank you. Yes, well, I think the parish system is really important to have a Christian presence in each community, where each person is covered. Each person can say, that is my church. I think it does come down to the church, us as ministers, having an incarnational ministry. We, with the lay people, we as the church, we need to be the church and be the body of Christ, loving and serving in those particular places in the communities that we serve. Whether that's traditional parish churches in every place, whether it's new forms of Christian community. I think there are some exciting developments, including in the north, actually, all over the north. Book called Fuzzy Church, I can recommend it. But I think collaborative ministry, clergy, lay ministry working together is going to be key to keeping the parish system going.
Thank you. I was trying to hit the phone and I hit the computer. It's this coordination thing. Thank you. And next question, please. Any further questions? Pam, I'm not seeing anybody with a hand up. No.
Me neither, Mike.
Okay, thank you. So what we'll do, we'll have our closing speeches. We'll go in reverse order, just for a bit of variety. So we'll start with Kate and work our way in the alternative direction. Then at the end, Bob, as Chair, House of Clergy, could I ask you to close with a blessing for us all, please? So we'll start with the closing speeches. Is at 1 minute each, up to 1 minute. So starting with you, please, Kate. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I knew my time as a W would come. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here and giving up your Monday evening. Is it Monday? I'll be honest, I thought, oh, Zoom hustings, like what will that be like? Is that a thing we want to do? Do you know what? Thank you so much for your engagement. Thank you for your brilliant questions that have challenged me, made me think. You know, fantastic to hear other people's answers. I don't know whether you feel that you've learned more about us, but I hope that you've got a bit of an insight into what we think, how we would vote. Please email if you've got any more questions. But just thank you for being here. Obviously, I'd love your vote or I wouldn't be doing this. So if you haven't already voted, you know, please do. But yeah, just be in touch if you have any more questions. And thanks so much for engaging with us tonight.
Thanks, Kate. Miranda, please.
Hi, everyone. Absolutely. Thank you all very much. I think you know who I am now. If you'd like to give me a first preference vote, I'd be delighted. I'm going to rather cheekily suggest who else I'd like you to vote for in that case. I'd really love you to vote for Martin as well. Only 2 of us who are standing on an inclusive ticket. It'd be really, really great to see him there. I'd love to have Kate on Synod with me. I think the best we're going to get is 2 out of 5 women, so it would be great for us both to be there. And I've served on Synod myself in the past with David, with Pete and with Kate, and I know they would all serve you well from my own experience, so commend them all to you.
Thank you. Martin, please.
Wow, thank you, Miranda. It's been great to see you all, and it's really helped me to think about who I'm going to vote for. Yes, Miranda, you're definitely going to get my vote too on an inclusive platform. But it's been great to hear from the other candidates as well. I've got a much better sense of who I want to vote for. I am about inclusivity. I am about equalities. I am about strengthening the growing inequality, I think, between the Church of England as an institution and the rights and responsibilities of individual clergy. I believe passionately that the gospel of Jesus Christ is about love and loving each other, loving our communities, loving our nation, loving the people that we serve. It might sound a bit twee, but I think the church should be about love. And if you vote for me on General Synod, that's what I'll be promoting, more love.
Thank you. Jack, please.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to put it on a slightly different note by saying that actually I found it a real tragedy this evening. I found it really disappointing that only white people have been represented in this panel. We've not got any people on this panel from an ethnic minority, I don't think, and that over half of the panel are men. I don't find that acceptable. But I would be excited about working with any of the candidates at General Synod. I would say that I'm also about inclusivity and greater diversity in the church. And I've tried to be clear about where I stand in response to each question. I believe that what I'm committed to seeking is rooted in theology, as I'm a current PhD student. So looking at how that affects change within the Church of England.
10 seconds.
Of ministry and mission in the parish. People have described me as a fresh breath of air, and I hope that I can bring that to General Synod.
Thank you. Dan, please.
Oh, thank you for hearing us this evening. I'm always excited to learn more about our amazing church. And there's some of your questions tonight that have just made me think, yes, I've got more reading to do. I want to be a part of a church, part of the change in our church going forward as we witness and minister to the love of our Lord Jesus. I always seek to be a gentle and loving voice in everything I do, seeking to follow as faithfully as possible the way of Jesus. In everything. I want to see systemic racism overturned within our church. I want to see a healthy and clear accountability system that challenges power and upholds safeguarding across our nation and particularly our church, and to serve in a church that is showing love and truth to our beautiful world, broken but loved by our Lord.
Thank you. Daniel, please.
Thank you. I believe strongly that the next synod will be instrumental in shaping our future and shaping our identity as the church. And I want to be part of a church and to serve in synod as a candidate who I feel, is grounded in the tradition of the church, but always moving, hopefully, towards Jesus Christ. And in so doing, helping others to encounter him. I think we need always to keep that as our main focus moving forward. And if you were to vote for me, I would try to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And David, please.
Well, if these were the only voters on the screen, I feel as though the election will be in safe hands. If these are the candidates you've got, I think you've got a great choice. How do you choose? So difficult. I just want to say that, I'm here tonight by surprise, in a sense. After 11 years on General Synod, I still love Jesus. I still love the Church of England. I still occasionally love General Synod, though sometimes it's a love-hate relationship. But I think its work is incredibly important. If you want somebody who's going to be very clear on all the binary issues and know what they're going to vote before they get there, don't vote for me. I'm one of the people who will wrestle with the complexities and wants to get these things right, but also does have a sense of urgency about it as well. So I bring some experience.
10 seconds.
I've got nothing more to say, apart from I agree with Miranda.
Thank you. Really grateful for everybody's participation. I'm sorry, I spent most of the time saying 10 seconds. And I refrain from any comments. I hope it was a helpful thing in terms of giving a perspective on candidates. You've got all candidates' details. If you want to talk to them individually, correspond with them individually, you have the details to do that. Encourage you to vote and vote vote prayerfully. The system is a system, so you have to vote online. You've got the details to do that. The only comment I would make was I think echoing David's comment at the end. I think we've got really, really good candidates. I think as somebody who works in the diocese, really encouraged to hear the commitment and the vision on the part of the candidate. So I think you've got a tough choice, but I think you've got a good choice. So Bob, are you okay to close in prayer for us, please?
Thank you, Mike. I'd just like to echo, well, first of all, thank you for what you've managed to do this evening, and to all of the candidates for having the courage to put your head above the parapet and risk standing for election, because if you didn't, the Church of England really would be in a mess. So thank you all tonight, and thank you for the answers that you've given. The day after tomorrow is the day we remember St. Michael and All Angels, which 68 years ago was an epic day. And so if you forgive me, I will offer the blessing for that day. God keep you in the fellowship of his saints. Christ protect you by the ministry of the angels. The Spirit make you holy in God's service. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be among you and remain with you always. Amen.
Amen. Thanks all, and huge thanks to Pam, who's been doing above and beyond on all of this. So thanks ever so much, Pam. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Thanks all, and see you soon, I hope. Thanks.